The next section we're going to talk about class is delegation, because delegation is a big part of learning what we can do as a CNA. And as a CNA, we are going to have tasks delegated to us. We're going to have things that the RN and the LVN ask us to do for them. So we need to understand the rules about delegation. So when you're delegating, or being delegated to, I should say, it means to authorize, delegation means to authorize another person to perform a nursing task. So if I'm an RN and you're my CNA and I say, I want you to go walk Mr. Jones for me, or I want you to go get Mrs. Smith up and take her to the bathroom and get a specimen for me, I would be delegating those tasks to you. An RN can delegate to his LVN and a CNA, and an LVN can delegate to a CNA. But as CNAs, we unfortunately don't get to do that. Delegation must protect the person's health and safety. So the delegating nurse is legally accountable. If I ask you to get Mr. Jones up and walk him, I have to make sure that you're the right person for that job and that you can do it correctly, because I'm still legally accountable if something happens. Now, it's not that you're not responsible as well and accountable for the care that you do, but I have to make sure that any task I delegate to someone else to do for me, that it's the appropriate task for them. We always want to make sure we're promoting safety and comfort. So delegation relies on what that patient or resident's needs are and the nurse's judgment. Okay, so that nurse needs to assess that person and plan what they need and who's the best person to do that job for them. They have to make sure that whoever they delegate to, that they're qualified to do that task, that that's within their scope of practice and their training. So they assess what the patient needs, they plan, what needs to be done, and then if they're going to delegate that to you to do, they have to communicate to you the proper directions. You need to make sure that you understand correctly what the expectation is. And that nurse also is supposed to be available to observe and supervise if needed, and then evaluate how it goes and give feedback. So there are rights of delegation, and the 5 rights of delegation is the right task, the right circumstance, the right person, the right directions and communications, and the right supervision. So those are our 5 rights of delegation. So when we're talking about the right task, is it the right task to be done for that patient? Is it the right task to be done in this situation? The right circumstances is what you're going to be doing for them. Is it going to harm them? Is it the appropriate thing to do for them in the situation that they're in now? Are you the right person for that job? Is it within your scope of practice? Have you been trained? And the right directions and communication, has that been given to you so you know exactly what the expectation is? It's been communicated to you clearly what is needed. And the right supervision, you have the right to have it supervised, and if you need help, especially that first time you do something, you have that right. So our role is to always protect the person from harm. So we can, before we can accept a task, but we have to make sure we're accountable and responsible for our actions. So even though that nurse is also legally accountable for anything that they delegate to you, you are also accountable and responsible for your actions. You have to report back to the nurse when you're done. So if I'm your nurse and I tell you to go get Mr. Jones up and to walk him to see how he does, you need to come back to me when you're done and say, hey, I walked him, he did really well, or, he's still kind of shaky on his feet, or, whatever the case may be. If you feel what was asked of you is unsafe, you can refuse to do it. You can say, I'm sorry, I'm just not comfortable doing that for him because of blah, blah, blah. And I don't feel that that's a safe thing for me to be doing. And then that nurse can then reevaluate and determine whether or not they want to assign someone else to do it. We can refuse a task. So you don't have to do everything that is asked of you. if it's not in your legal limits. If they're asking you to do something, they're asking you to, let's say they come in and bring medications into the patient's room and you've got the patient up in the bathroom, so they set the medications on the table and say, oh, give those for me when he gets back. That's not in your legal limit. It's not within your job description. You are not allowed to do it, so you have the right to say no. If you think the task can harm someone, you think what they're asking you to do is ethically wrong or can be harmful to the person, you have the right to say no. You do not know how to do the task. Now that one, you have the right to say, I don't know how to do the task. Can you show me? Okay, if they're not willing to show you, then you have the right to refuse it. But for instance, giving an enema, I told you that's something in the nursing homes they don't have their CNAs do, at least the nursing homes we're going to be going to. But if you get a job at one of the local hospitals, you may have to do this. You have the right to say, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable doing this. I've never done it before. I need help the first time. And if they say, oh, I don't have time to help you, then it's okay to say, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable doing it then. If they're willing to show you, though, then it's something you're going to learn. If the directions are unclear or unethical in some way, you have the right to refuse. So you need to use common sense. You don't ignore an order. If a nurse tells you to do something or is asking you to do something and you're concerned by it or you know it's something you can't do, you need to tell the nurse, I'm really sorry, that's not within my job scope, or I'm really sorry, I'm uncomfortable because of this, this, and this. You have to have sound reasons, but you can refuse something if you feel it's not the proper thing to be doing. So I have just a couple little scenarios, and these are things that have actually happened to my students. So you're feeding your resident, the nurse brings in the patient's medications, she leaves the pills next to the resident and asks you to give them to her with her food. What would your response be? So I am going to have that as a discussion question that you can post your response to. And then after you post your response, I want you to read two of your classmates and you guys can kind of critique them. The next one we'll look at is the nurse asks you to perform a task that's in your job description, but you've not done it before. Okay, again, what would your response be? Okay, and again, you'll post your response and then you will be critiquing two of your classmates. And then this third one here, a nurse asks you to help turn and reposition a patient who's assigned to another CNA. Is this okay for you to be doing? So you can think about these and I will have them on the discussion board for you and you can go ahead and post your response. And we'll meet back in a little bit.